Hey there, compliance officers and administrators. As the great American singer and songwriter Axl Rose once said, "Welcome to the jungle." Today, I'm going to explain one of the most important but least understood best practices for workplace compliance: competency assessments. American Dictionary defines handy as being skillful with the hands or with using tools, especially in making or repairing things. I like to think of myself as being handy. I've worked with a few tools over the years, and if you assign me a task and I haven't done that task before, I usually think I can figure it out. According to a survey by Porch, 62% of us Generation Xers consider ourselves to be handy. That seems about right. We grew up when you needed to be able to read a paper map to get somewhere new, and we had to program VCRs to keep from missing our favorite shows. What's interesting, though, about the Porch study is that they also polled millennials, and 89% of millennials believe they are handy. So if handiness represents skills, and skills are gained from experience, why is it that people with less experience consider themselves to be more skilled? There's a quote from Virginia Satir that sums up this conundrum perfectly. She said, "Our biggest problem as human beings is not knowing that we don't know. We are hopelessly ignorant about our own competence or lack thereof." Let me recount a story that illustrates my own experience with youthful overconfidence conflicting with incompetence. In July 2000, a Category F4 tornado came through Pine Lake, and it went straight over our family cabin. Fortunately, none of us were up at the lake that day, but we got a call from our neighbors who told us of unimaginable destruction and disarray. They said we should come as soon as possible and bring trucks and tools because the cleanup required was enormous. We had a large property with dozens of huge trees, each so big you couldn't put your arms around the trunks, and they had been snapped like twigs. So I load up garbage bags, wheelbarrows, axes, saws, and a bunch of other tools into my pickup, and I drove up to Pine Lake. In a heartwarming twist, it wasn't just property owners that headed up to the scene. There were hundreds of complete strangers that had seen the news, loaded up their station wagons, minivans, pickup trucks, and utility trailers, and had also come to offer assistance. One of the Good Samaritans must have come from the Yukon, because he looked like he'd spent the last 5 years in the wilderness. I don't remember his name now, but let's just call him Lumberjack Logan. Logan sees that I'm headed down to the fallen trees with this little no-name chainsaw that my grandfather had picked up at Canadian Tire years ago and handed down to me when he moved into the city. Lumberjack Logan looks at this pathetic saw that I'm carrying and he says to me, "Son, you're gonna need a Husqvarna for this mess." And he pulls out this beast of a chainsaw. The one he had was probably 8 inches longer than this one. So I put on my gardening gloves, I put on my bike helmet, my squash goggles, and I twist some little foam earplugs into my ears. And I put the saw down on the ground. I grab the starter handle and I give it a good pull, and it goes nowhere. And I mean nowhere. It does nothing. So I say to Logan, I said, "Dude, your engine in your chainsaw is seized." He walks over, gives me the stink eye, and literally gives it a pull that I was sure was going to snap the rope. But of course, this thing roars to life, and the sound is deafening. So Logan hands it back to me, and he proclaims it works just fine. So with the chainsaw running, I set to cutting up the first felled tree. I'm giving it gas, and smoke is coming out of this thing, and the chain just is not moving. And Logan taps me on the shoulder and he says, "Son, the brake." Right, the brake. And so of course I released the brake. And it was incredible how easily this Husqvarna is cutting through these massive trees like a hot knife through butter. And at this stage, I'm quite convinced I've successfully transitioned into a professional logger. But the trees are all mangled and there are these branches everywhere. And so I'm using the tip of the saw to cut the smaller pieces. And Logan has seen enough. He comes over and he takes the saw out of my hands and he says, "Son, this tornado has already claimed enough lives. I'll cut up the trees and you can organize a chain of volunteers to pass the logs up to the road." So truth be told, I have lumberjack Logan to thank for not losing any limbs or horribly disfiguring my face. What I had gone through back on that day in July 2000, unbeknownst to me, was a competency assessment, and I had been deemed incompetent. We hear the term incompetence all the time, particularly in the workplace. Most of you would be able to list off a long list of examples. You can identify an incompetent employee by their lack of productivity. They're late with tasks, they're inefficient, and their costs are higher. You'll also notice the poor quality of their work. Their work will have errors and defects leading to rejects and expensive customer credits. And you'll see it in their safety records in the form of accidents, injuries, damages, and spills. But nearly everything proving incompetence is a lagging indicator. You only have confirmation of incompetence through failures and poor results. But how do you determine competency, especially given that a body of work won't yet have been performed? Let's imagine you are hiring a juggler for your kid's birthday party. What is the only way to know for sure before the event that the juggler can juggle? You can ask him to show you. You watching someone perform a challenging task is an assessment, and your determination of competency is based on a criterion. A criterion is defined as a principle or standard by which something may be judged or decided. And in most cases, you'd want more than one criterion, in which case they're called criteria. In the chainsaw example, criteria for operating the saw might include knowing what PPE to wear, how to properly mix the fuel and oil, knowing how to properly add the bar and chain oil, or how to set the tension on the chain, how to engage and disengage the brake, how to start the saw or how to stop the saw, how to hold the saw, not to mention how to position the saw while cutting through a tree or a branch. Once you understand the concept of a competency assessment and its performance criteria, you'll quickly realize that there are countless other related competencies as well. You wouldn't want to just stop at chainsaw operation because felling a tree is a whole other competency. You might think, okay, what are competencies, assessments, and performance criteria necessary for workplace compliance? They are. Occupational health and safety regulations require employers to ensure workers are competent to safely perform work without supervision. Now here's the shameless plug. Workhub makes this process a breeze. The setup in our software only takes a few minutes, and it's just a matter of typing in the criteria, adding a pre-qualified assessor or instructor, and assigning the competency to positions in your organizations. Workers assign the competencies, which we call assessees, then request assessments from the assessors, and the assessors arrange with the assessees a time to do the assessment. During the assessment, assessors determine if the assessee has satisfactorily performed each criterion. If all the criteria are performed satisfactorily, the assessee is marked as compliant. The worker, and therefore your organization, becomes compliant, and you have the due diligence you need. Most importantly, with a process like this in place, you should have only competent workers performing their duties at your workplace. Okay, folks, what I'm about to attempt is extraordinarily dangerous, so do not, I repeat, do not try this at home.
I'm still alive, but I'm very badly injured. Perhaps you could toss me a Band-Aid or some antibacterial cream. I'm in an extraordinarily large amount of pain. The bone has gone through the skin. I fear it might be gangrenous. The wound is beginning to smell a little like almonds, which is not good. Please? No one?
Sorry.
I'll try the other leg. Oh!